Thank you so much for coming here today. I'm a professor at San Diego State University, and I have the honor of every single year being able to teach military active duty public affairs officer students. And so today we have 12 of these amazing students here to present some of their research. This program has been around for almost 2 decades, and we really pride ourselves as a part of this, of taking that opportunity to have that mid-career officer, most of which do not have degrees in communication. Sorry, Dr. Tyndall. I remember the remarks from a previous session, right? We're tying it all together here. And so, even though they don't have formal degrees in communication, they have been practicing public relations for 5+ years. And so they come to us to really start that transition from being a technician into a strategic communicator. So how do we do that? Research. If you were in this room for the breakout sessions, the last couple of sessions that we had, we of course had that opportunity to hear how important data-driven decisions were and get an opportunity to talk about some of those tools that you use as a part of that. And so today we will have that opportunity to hear these different research studies. As we get started, I of course want to thank the Navy for bringing these 12 students to us. We have in the room, currently looking for a seat, Admiral Perry and Master Chief Sistai. Admiral Perry is the Navy Chief of Information, so he is the highest ranking public affairs officer in the land. And in fact, he would oversee, that's right, hello. He probably wants to be down here at this podium right now himself, actually. And we also have his predecessor, retired Rear Admiral Brown, here as well. So thank you, gentlemen, and Master Chief Sistai for coming to this today to support your students. So we're going to hear today 3 different studies from Navy officers and Marine officers, and I'm going to have them go back to back so that we can pool the question time that they have, and then you can ask questions to any of the 3 studies all at one time. Okay, so if you have questions for the first or the second one, make sure you're writing them down so that we can just use the time expeditiously all at the end to do that. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our first team, our Navy team. So welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Tasia Griffin. I'm joined by my colleagues Nicholas Splaney, Jared Reed-Dixon, and James Adams. Today we're going to be presenting our research that we conducted over the academic school year, which explores diversity communication through the lens of the employee-organization relationship theory. Before we begin, I do have to give a quick disclaimer. This research was done independently and in a non-military capacity. And so the findings and our proposals that we're going to discuss today, please note that the U.S. Navy or the Department of Defense as a whole may not necessarily endorse them or really align with what we're saying, because this was done independently at SDSU. Okay, who has heard of the phenomenon quiet quitting? Everyone, right? Does anyone feel comfortable? Shout out what you think it means.
Checking labor.
Doing the bare minimum. Right. Okay. That's right. So did you know that the Bureau of Labor Statistics found that 47 million people quit their jobs in 2021? That was the largest quit rate ever recorded in history. This mass exodus of employees leaving the workforce is known as the Great Resignation. More recent research conducted by Gallup in 2023 actually found that nearly half of survey respondents were actively looking for new jobs. Even more staggering, nearly 70% of those surveyed admitted to quiet quitting or loud quitting, which, as we just discussed, refers to employees who are intentionally reducing their productivity while they're on the clock, or those who are loud quitting, which means they're actually engaging in disruptive behaviors in the workplace due to dissatisfaction. So why is everyone so unhappy? Well, the research says that organizational climate is to blame. That refers to how you feel. Do you feel like you belong? Are you part of the team? What's your work-life balance? Naturally, because we're public affairs officers, what did we think? Okay, well, what's PR's role? What can we do within our organization to actually make a positive change?
And so I think if there's one thing that all of us can agree on today, it's that diversity, equity, and inclusion matter. It matters regardless of what college we're at, what organization we're representing, what company we're working for, whether we're the Marine Corps or the Navy, DEI matters. And so when we were looking at, can we figure out how to make things generalizable so that everybody in this room can take something away from it, we thought to ourselves, 3 things to ensure that the sample population could be generalizable so everybody can have a takeaway today. Number 1, what's the size of the organization? The United States Navy is comparable to some of the companies that we have in here today, if not larger than some of the universities that we have here today. Number 2, is the comparable population, does it have enough diversity in it? If we did a little scrape of and pulled a bunch of people randomly, does it have a diverse representation across all fields? And lastly, does this organization have established public affairs departments inside of them? And just so I know, thank you, Dr. Sweetser, but what is a public affairs officer and what do we do? So, depending on what level you're at, some of us could look at us as being the chief communication officers for our command, okay? Crisis comms, talking points, aligning, synchronizing, all of the things, but we also control social media. And so as Tasia said, what can we do to affect the organizational culture? And so when we're looking at our organization, we're thinking to ourselves, you know what? The Navy kind of fits this. The Navy is something that we all can compare to. And with that, they also have, the Navy, we have issues with retention, we have issues with recruitment among historically marginalized communities. And so for the purpose of this research, we are defining historically marginalized communities as the minorities of gender, race, and ethnicity.
We utilized a mixed method approach to our research. Our first method was a survey where we used a collection of 186 survey respondents comprised of naval officers. We used convenience sampling over the December 3rd, 2023 to February 20th, 2024. To recruit these respondents, we partnered with private affinity groups. These groups aren't officially part of the Navy, but their membership is comprised of naval officers that share a common identity or thread. We'll go into the scales that we used in our survey instrument in a second, but we also asked demographic questions as well as respondents' engagement with official Navy PR products. Our second method was a content analysis, where we looked at Instagram posts of still images and graphics over the last year, and we specifically identified 2 regional areas that we wanted to focus on as represented by the respondents that we had from our survey. That was the east of the continental United States, represented by U.S. Fleet Forces Command, and then we had the west, which we looked at U.S. Pacific Fleet as they kind of encompass the western region.
We divided our survey respondents into 2 groups: marginalized, based on race, gender, and ethnicity, and non-marginalized, which identified as white and male. And we wanted to compare index mean scores between the 2 groups based on whether or not they saw marginalized individuals included in their organization or their command's social media pages and public affairs products. These are the 4 scales we used to measure, 2 of which were factored into 2 separate components, so 6 measures total. And starting with the marginalized group only, we conducted means tests, and in the Navy, we like to start with the bottom line up front. And the bottom line up front is that inclusive PA actions do affect the attitudes of marginalized individuals. And our research shows this because of those 6 measures, across the board, every single measure was statistically significantly higher for those individuals who saw marginalized individuals in their commands, social media pages, and public affairs products. All 6 measures. One of those measures was not statistically significant, and that was organizational belonging for everyone. However, organizational belonging for self was, and that shows that having inclusive imagery in your products increases a marginalized employee's sense of belonging in the organization. So that's point number 1 on the board. Now, our second point, a moment ago, we discussed the retention crisis. We wanted to see if inclusive imagery in our organization's PA products has an effect on retention likelihood. So let's see how the marginalized group responded. Survey says, yes, inclusive imagery can affect the retention likelihood of marginalized employees. Think about that. Inclusive imagery, we now know has a positive effect on the attitudes, the sense of organizational belonging, and the retention likelihood of our marginalized employees. So what about the non-marginalized employees? We ran the same test with the same measures. Do you think inclusive imagery had any effect on them? Well, if your guess was yes, move down. That would be wrong. Inclusive imagery has no effect, based on our results, no significant effect, positive or negative, with the non-marginalized employees. So you lose nothing with the non-marginalized employees, yet you gain so much with the marginalized employees in your organization. So to sum it all up, something as simple as posting more inclusive content, showing the diverse faces from our organization in our public affairs products can have an impact, a positive impact on the attitudes, sense of belonging, and even the retention likelihood of the marginalized employees.
Thanks, Nick. So now that we've done our research, we're starting to look ahead. How can we continue to build upon this understanding? What can we do next? Really, we think the next step in our research is really content specificity. So now we know PA actions absolutely matter to marginalized employees. Now what we need to know is what type of content resonates the most. And so as we look forward, we think that this type of information is really going to improve our communication strategies, and we're going to be able to be a lot more deliberate on what we're putting out. Thank you so much for your time. We'd love to continue this dialogue, so if you do have your phone on you, please scan this QR code so that we can stay in touch. Thanks so much.
By the way, their slides look fantastic on the back. So it's not their slides are not lining up. There's something weird with the translation of the computer, so we'll try to figure it out.